"You're great, but you're just not wife material." That's what he said. Right after I spent 4 years of my life building him up, loving him through his worst, and believing in dreams he hadn't even dared say out loud yet. "You're the kind of girl guys date, not marry." That one. That line broke me in places I didn't know existed. My name is Tessa Monroe. And this is the story of how I turned heartbreak into power. How I went from not enough to everything he never thought he'd need. Until it was too late. I met Jacob when I was 23. Fresh out of college. Still trying to figure out what being an adult actually meant. And he was magnetic. You know the type. That quiet, confident energy that pulls you in without even trying. A half smile that makes you forget your name. Eyes that look like they hold secrets, except they're probably just empty. But I didn't see that back then. All I saw was potential. And God help me, I fell hard. He was a struggling entrepreneur when we met. Broke. Stubborn. Full of ideas. He worked at a failing tech startup by day and coded in his bedroom by night. I paid for dinners. Covered rent when he came up short. Helped him practice for pitch meetings he never actually got. And every time someone told me he was using me, I smiled and said, "You don't know him like I do." Because in my mind, love was supposed to be patient. Love was supposed to wait for him to become the man he said he wanted to be. And in all that waiting, I lost myself. Stopped going out with friends. Stopped writing. Stopped dreaming about my own career. I thought I was investing in something. Someone who would grow with me. But the truth? I was growing alone. And the more I watered him, the more I withered. I stayed. Because he told me he loved me. Because I believed loyalty meant staying even when it hurt. Because I thought that if I loved him enough, eventually, he'd see me. Not as his cheerleader. Not as the woman who kept him stable. But as the one he couldn't build a future without. But then came the night that burned everything down. We were sitting in his car, just outside a restaurant I had picked, paid for, and booked the reservation at. It was our anniversary. For years. I thought he was going to propose. Instead, he stared out the windshield and said, "I don't think we should keep doing this." I blinked. Doing what? This. I mean, you're great. You really are. But you're not the kind of woman I see myself marrying. I couldn't breathe. What does that even mean? You're just too independent. Too intense. You don't really let me lead. I need someone softer. Simpler. Softer? Simpler? Was that code for someone who didn't ask questions? Someone who didn't challenge him? Someone who didn't build him from the ground up? I got out of that car and never looked back. But in the weeks that followed, I fell apart. Not because I missed him, but because I couldn't understand how a man I gave everything to could just leave. Not only that, he made it sound like I was the problem. Like being strong was a flaw. But here's the thing about heartbreak. If you survive it, really survive it, you come out on the other side unrecognizable. And that's exactly what I did. I picked up the shattered pieces of my self-worth. And I rebuilt. Not to prove him wrong. But to finally see myself as the woman I'd forgotten I was. They say heartbreak doesn't kill you. But it does bury parts of you. And after Jacob left, I wasn't even sure who I was anymore. I didn't cry right away. I didn't scream or throw things or go on some wild girls trip like you see in the movies. I just stopped. Stopped sleeping. Stopped eating. Stopped returning texts from the few friends I had left. The silence was deafening. Not just in my apartment but inside me. I remember lying in bed 2 days after he ended things, staring at the ceiling fan. It spun lazily like it had all the time in the world. Meanwhile, my chest felt like it was collapsing. I replayed his words over and over. "You're not wife material. Too intense. I need someone softer." As if being passionate, being present, being invested was a flaw. I kept thinking back on everything I'd done. The birthday parties I planned. The hours I spent proofreading his proposals. The way I'd learned to shrink myself just enough so he didn't feel threatened. And for what? For him to decide I was good enough to date, but not good enough to marry? Wrecked me. Not just because he left, but because I had no idea who I was without him. I tried to distract myself. I went back to work, smiled through meetings, nodded when my boss asked if I was okay. But I was running on autopilot. I'd spent so long pouring into him that when he was gone I was empty. And no one even noticed. Not my coworkers. Not my neighbors. Not even my family. Because I'd become a ghost, quiet, functional, and completely invisible. One night I opened my journal. The one I hadn't touched in almost 2 years. The pages were dusty. The ink in my favorite pen had dried out. But I forced myself to write. One sentence. I don't know who I am without him. And then another. But maybe that's the beginning. It wasn't much. But it was something. The next night I wrote more. Not about him. About me. The girl I used to be. The dreams I had before I shrunk them to fit his comfort zone. The fire I buried just to keep the peace. And slowly, painfully, I began to feel something. Not peace. But anger. And not the kind that wants revenge. The kind that wants to rise. I started setting alarms again. I stopped stalking his social media. I blocked him everywhere, even email. Because I realized something. Closure isn't something they give you. It's something you take when you finally accept that they don't deserve another ounce of your energy. I cleaned out my apartment like I was burning down the past. Threw away his hoodie. Deleted every photo. Donated the wine glasses we'd bought together, for when we get our first place. And when I looked around afterward, it wasn't sad. It was empty. But in the kind of way that makes space for something better. I started therapy. At first I thought it'd just be someone to vent to. But my therapist didn't let me stay in the victim narrative. She asked hard questions. Why do you think love has to hurt? What part of you believes you weren't enough? What would your life look like if you stopped waiting for someone to choose you? I didn't have answers. But I was finally asking the right questions. And then came the breakthrough. One morning I woke up early, no alarm. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and started working on something I hadn't touched in years. My blog. I used to write about life, love, growth, messiness. And somehow even after all the pain I still had a voice. I hit publish on a post titled, "When he said I wasn't wife material, he meant I was too much for his ego." It got 10 views. Then 100. Then thousands. The comments came pouring in. Women saying, "This is me. Thank you for writing what I couldn't say out loud." He said the same thing to me. And just like that, I realized I wasn't alone. Rock bottom doesn't always come with a dramatic collapse. Sometimes it creeps in like fog, quiet, unannounced, until you look around and realize you've been living in it for far too long. For me, it came one Tuesday morning. I'd just gotten home from work. Still in my blazer. Still wearing a smile that didn't belong to me. I walked in, dropped my bag on the floor, sat on the kitchen stool, and stared at the sink for 40 minutes. Nothing happened. I didn't cry. I didn't move. I just sat there, numb, hollow, like a shadow of someone I used to know. My apartment was a mess. Dishes stacked up. Laundry unfolded. Lights too dim. It was like I was living inside a question mark. And in that moment I felt something snap. Not dramatically. Not loudly. But like a thread that had been stretched for too long finally giving up. I stood up. Walked to the mirror. And I didn't recognize the woman staring back. Her eyes were tired. Her skin pale. Her posture curled in like she was trying to disappear. I whispered to my reflection, "What happened to you?" And then just like that, the dam broke. I cried for hours. Ugly, gut-wrenching sobs. Tears for the girl who lost herself in a man who couldn't see her worth. Tears for the nights I stayed when I should have walked away. Tears for the dreams I put on hold so he could chase his. It wasn't just grief over the breakup. It was grief over me. The parts one abandoned. The fire I smothered. The woman I muted just to be palatable. That night I didn't try to be okay. I didn't reach for a self-help book or scroll through Instagram quotes about healing. I just let myself unravel. And you know what? There was something sacred in that. Because the thing about rock bottom is, once you've hit it, you stop falling. There's nowhere lower to go. Which means the only option left is up. The next morning I did something radical. I called in sick. Not because I was ill. But because for once I needed a day for me. Not my job, not my bills, not the world. Just me. I showered. Fully. Put on lotion. brushed my hair. I opened every window in the apartment. Let the light in. Let the stale air out. And for the first time in what felt like months, I breathed. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I danced. Alone. Barefoot. No music. No rhythm. Just me and my body remembering what freedom felt like. After that, I sat down with a notebook and asked myself a question I'd been avoiding. If Jacob hadn't left, what version of me would I have become? The answer scared me. Because she wasn't bold. She wasn't joyful. She wasn't whole. She was small. Careful. Controlled. And I realized something heartbreaking. If he hadn't left, I would have kept shrinking. Kept dimming. Kept making myself less just to keep him close. So maybe he didn't reject me. Maybe he released me. That day marked a shift. I didn't suddenly become confident or healed or unstoppable. But I started choosing myself in small ways. One coffee at a time. One journal entry. One mirror pep talk. And with each small choice, I stitched myself back together. I started saying no. No to toxic friends who only called when they needed something. No to working overtime without pay. No to anything that made me feel like I had to earn love or respect. And in that no, I found my first real yes. Yes to writing again. Yes to signing up for that business class I'd always put off. Yes to imagining a life that didn't revolve around being someone's partner. Then something unexpected happened. The blog post that went semi-viral? It got picked up by a women's media site. They asked if I'd be willing to write a series of essays about emotional recovery and rebuilding identity after heartbreak. I said yes. Not because I was healed, but because I wanted to document the becoming. The in-between. The messy. The real. And readers responded. They didn't want perfect. They wanted truth. One email stood out to me. It said, "You put words to the ache I couldn't explain. I thought I was crazy for feeling too much. But now I see. I'm just human. Thank you." I cried reading that. Because all I ever wanted was to be seen. And now, my story was helping others feel seen too. That's when it hit me. Maybe the reason Jacob couldn't handle me was because I had depths he never dared explore in himself. Maybe I wasn't too much. Maybe he was just not enough. And that wasn't my burden to carry anymore. Healing didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like consistency. It felt like waking up and making my bed, even when no one would see it. It felt like choosing water over wine on the nights I was tempted to numb myself. It felt like whispering, "I am enough," when my old demons tried to scream otherwise. Bit by bit I started rebuilding. Not just my routines, but my identity. The woman I used to be, the one who put everyone else first, she was gone. What rose in her place was quieter but firmer. I didn't need to prove my worth anymore. I'd found it, buried under all the ways I'd twisted myself to be lovable. And once I uncovered it, I protected it like a sacred thing. The writing gigs kept growing. First a few guest essays. Then a regular column. Then, my own digital series about emotional rebirth after betrayal. Women shared their stories with me like open wounds. And in each one I saw myself. We weren't broken. We were breaking open. And with every story I shared, I healed a little more. Around this time, I made a decision that scared me. I applied for a small business grant. One that supported creative women entrepreneurs. My dream? To turn my blog into a brand. A platform. A place where healing wasn't just personal, it was profitable. The old me would have hesitated. She would have waited until everything was perfect. Until she had more credentials. Until she was worthy. But the new me? She hit submit. 3 weeks later I got the email. "Congratulations. You've been awarded the grant." I screamed so loud my neighbor knocked to check if I was okay. And for the first time in years my tears were from joy. I used that money to hire a web designer. Launch a merch line. Develop courses and digital guides around emotional self-worth and rebuilding identity. And slowly but surely, Tessa Monroe became more than a name. She became a movement. Then came the email I never expected. It was from a TV producer. She'd read one of my articles. Loved it. "Have you ever considered adapting your story for a documentary series?" I had to read the message 3 times just to believe it was real. Not because I didn't think my story mattered, but because for so long I'd believed no one wanted to hear it. Now people were asking for it. I flew to LA for a meeting. Sat in a glass-walled conference room with people who actually listened when I spoke. One of them said, "You're the voice so many women have been waiting for." I smiled. But inside I was hugging my younger self, the one who once begged Jacob to see her. Because now, the world was listening. And then, because life has a sense of humor, he reappeared. Of course he did. It started with a like on an Instagram post of mine. A quote that read, "She stopped chasing love and built a life so full it started chasing her." The next day a message. "Proud of you. I always knew you had something special." I almost laughed. He always knew. Well, he only saw it once it became undeniable. A week later I got another message. "I'll be in town soon. Want to grab a coffee? Just to catch up." And for a second I stared at it. Because the old me, the one who still wanted validation, she perked up. But the woman I'd become? She leaned back in her chair, smiled, and whispered, "Too late." I didn't respond. Not out of spite, but because I had nothing left to prove. He didn't break me. He revealed me. And in walking away he made space for the woman I was always meant to be. That's the part no one tells you about heartbreak. It's not the end of your story. It's the chapter where the real one begins. I didn't respond to his message. But life has a way of forcing confrontation when the lesson isn't complete. 3 weeks after Jacob slid into my DMs like nothing had happened, I saw him. In person. At a book event in the city. I was a featured speaker. One of 5 women invited to talk about writing through pain and turning it into purpose. I stood behind the podium, heart steady, voice strong. And as I read my passage aloud, a piece about knowing your worth before anyone else does, I saw him in the back row. Arms crossed. Jaw tight. Eyes fixed on me like he was seeing a ghost, or a revelation. After the panel there was a meet and greet. I signed books. Took photos. Hugged women who whispered, "Thank you for telling my story." And then I turned around, and he was there. Same face. Same smirk. But there was something different now. Small. Like a man standing in the shadow of a woman he never imagined would outgrow him. "Hey Tess," he said. Tess. Only he ever called me that. I used to melt when he did. No. Sounded like a name that belonged to a version of me I buried. "Jacob," I nodded, calm as stone. "You were incredible up there." "Thank you." Awkward pause. Then he said the thing I knew was coming. "I've been following your work. I had no idea you'd go this far." I raised an eyebrow. "That's funny. I always did." He laughed nervously. "You look amazing. Really. You seem different." "I am." Another pause. Then he looked down, ran a hand through his hair and asked, "Do you ever think about us?" There was not quite an apology. Not quite accountability. Just enough nostalgia to bait me. I gave him a long look. "You mean, do I think about the girl who lost herself trying to be good enough for a man who couldn't see her value?" "Sometimes," I said. "But she's gone. And I've never been more grateful." He looked stung. But I didn't stop. "You told me I wasn't wife material. That was too much. But the truth is, what you meant was I couldn't be controlled. I challenged you. I reflected your insecurities. And that scared you." He opened his mouth to respond, but I raised my hand. "Don't. You don't get to rewrite it now. You walked away from a woman who would have moved mountains for you. And I'm glad you did. Because it forced me to become the woman I was always meant to be, without waiting for anyone's permission." The silence between us was heavy. But I wasn't uncomfortable in it. Because I had finally said everything I needed to. Not for him. For me. He blinked. "I was wrong," he said softly. "I see that now. And if I could do it over." "You can't," I cut in. "And that's okay. Because I'm not angry anymore." I smiled genuinely. "I'm just done." I turned and walked away. My heels clicking against the floor like punctuation marks on a sentence I'd rewritten in my favor. He didn't follow. And that was the final confirmation. I wasn't his what if anymore. I was his never again. Later that night I stood in front of my mirror. Same mirror that once reflected back a version of me lost and hollow. But now it showed a woman who didn't beg to be loved. A woman who commanded respect, radiated purpose, glowed from the inside out. Not because of what she'd gained, but because of everything she'd let go of. Heartbreak didn't just change me, it unveiled me. And Jacob, he wasn't my villain anymore. He was just a footnote in a story he was never meant to finish. They say you don't know how strong you are until being strong is your only option. But I'd go a step further. Sometimes your strength doesn't show up in the fight. It shows up in the walk away. Looking back, Jacob did me a favor. He labeled me as not wife material like it was an insult. But it was a prophecy. Because I wasn't made to fit someone's narrow checklist of what a wife should be. I wasn't born to be manageable, quiet, soft just for his comfort. I was born to be whole. Now I am. Not perfect, but whole. I don't spend my nights wondering what could have been. I spend them dreaming about what's still possible. And every dream I chase now, is mine. Unapologetically mine. I started dating again not to fill a void but to share my overflow. Because I'm not looking for someone to complete me. I'm looking for someone who understands that I come already complete. Somewhere along this journey I learned the most radical thing a woman can do is fall wildly, madly, relentlessly in love with herself. And I did. I learned to celebrate small wins. To dress up for no reason. To laugh at my own jokes. To say no without guilt. To walk into rooms like I belong there, because I do. I stopped shrinking. I stopped second-guessing. I stopped begging to be chosen. Because now, I choose me. Every time. And as for Jacob, I don't wish him pain. I don't wish him regret. But I hope he understands something now. You don't throw away loyalty. You don't walk away from someone who saw you before the world did. And when you do, you don't get a second chance. Because women like me, we don't go back. We grow. So if you're watching this right now, if someone ever told you that you're too much, that your standards are too high, that you're not the marrying type, here's what I want you to hear. You are not too much. You are too powerful for someone who's not ready. You're not hard to love. You just refuse to settle for less than you deserve. Let them go. Let them doubt you. Let them look back one day and realize they lost someone irreplaceable. And while they do that, you live loudly, boldly, unapologetically. Because you, my love, are not wife material. You're legacy material. And your story? It's just getting started. Have you ever been told you weren't enough for someone, only to rise higher than they ever expected? Tell your story in the comments. Your strength might help someone else find theirs. For more stories of heartbreak, healing, and rising stronger, subscribe and turn on notifications. New episodes every week. You're not alone and you're not done.